Hey guys, I'm Lisa.
And I'm Johnny.
And so we're doing something a little bit different this time around. Obviously, we're not doing the whole like spiel with the graphics and whatnot. So we're trying something new, and this is Johnny's idea, and I think it's working out great. It looks better than the original. And I think it was just to give us a little bit more freedom to do things the way we want to do them.
Right. Yeah. A little bit more relaxed, I guess you could say too. Not as formatted where we have like a segment where you just talk and I talk. I think we found that like the best material that came out of us was when we had that interaction with each other.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I hope you like the new format. Those of you who've seen our episodes already before, welcome to the new look here. Those of you just joined for the first time, welcome. Hope you enjoy what we're going to put out there. We're really going to talk about a lot of our favorite movies from the past. As you were mentioning earlier, we're not really going to, go into like the latest horror, like latest news and stuff. We may touch on that.
Yeah.
But I think what we really want to do is just go back to the time when we experienced horror movies and movies that we enjoyed and talk about those. We'll bounce around though, but yeah, I think that's when we really, when we connect, like, I don't know, sometimes I come to work and I ask if you've seen a movie and you've seen it. It's like we just go off and we start talking about like
yeah, it's just so much more organic that way. I feel like it was just like I had to have a structure and notes and like make sure I hit certain points. And then if I fell off somewhere, there was nobody to like pick up, where I left off and keep that momentum going. And like coming back around to the idea of like we choose movies based on just what we like. Like today we're going to be talking about Interview with the Vampire. It came out in 1994. And I love this movie because I watched it like 1,000 times when I was growing up, and it solidified my love for certain horror movies, certain like styles of movies, suspense or like gothic themed movies. And like from there built out like my expectations for movies coming out now. And so like, why not come back around and revisit some of these films that like set the foundation and built this framework from which I look at other movies now even. Right.
Yeah, totally. And for me in particular, I remember the imagery of this movie stuck with me for so long because when I was younger, I wasn't really allowed to see it, But
really?
Yeah, I mean, well, not necessarily I wasn't allowed. I guess I just never had an opportunity to see it. In the 90s, you really don't, unless you own it, I guess, or you go to the movies,
yeah,
right?
Or you see it in the theater, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you can go
online. Or you
online.
rent it from Blockbuster.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, it's the little thing behind it's gone. You can't rent it,
Oh, shit, yeah.
But no, I think I remember seeing it on TV at some point later on when it was a special broadcast, probably heavily edited. But even then, I remember key scenes from it, and I never watched it in its entirety. So
really,
yeah, I just remember like the ending. I remember certain scenes that really stuck with me. But like for me, being older and watching it, it has a different meaning now, I guess. Like because when I was smaller, I was like, to me, it's just like vampires on the screen. Whoa, what's going on? But it really stuck with me though. Like I remembered the scenes in the movie that really, creeped me out back then. And I think they really holds pretty well now too, with like the effects and everything and how they presented the art design and everything.
So this movie was your choice for this episode. So would you say that like everything that you said right now is the reason why you wanted to do this film?
Yes, exactly. Because it's just one of those things, like I said, it was just stuck with me. And I'm like, I got to revisit this movie. I got to watch it with like, being older and having different interpretation of it. So I'm glad we chose to do this.
Nobody has to convince me to talk about this movie. Like I love it. Like I said, I've watched it like 1,000 times. And like for my generation, our generation, like, I went to high school with a lot of guys, like this solidified their like gothic persona.
Oh yes. Yeah. This
like the clove cigarettes and the fedoras and the like trench coats,
exactly.
Like pre-Matrix trench coats and like being super mysterious and dark and all of that. So, I mean, it has a lot of fun elements of what it did for our generation, like the quirky things people took from it. But at the same time, like this exists as one of my top 5 favorite vampire movies of all time.
Oh, nice.
Because, and the only thing that goes above it, so this might be number 2. Number 1 is Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah, that is
with Gary Oldman. Yeah. Like he is top, and so we'll probably hit that at some point.
Oh, for sure.
But the other thing about this film that it did at the time that it came out was it romanticized the story of the vampire in such a way that you felt empathy. Like you connected directly, because it's like, I think films before that had vampires were really about fear and attraction and not knowing what to do with that. But it was like a distance, right? We kept our distance from the vampire. We kept our distance from this creature. Whereas in this film, like they are the only characters that we really connect with. So we're intimate with them. We feel for them. We feel their pain and their connections and their wants and desires and stuff like that. And so I think that that's part of what I love about this movie, was that it told this story in a completely different way.
Yeah, totally. It's not like the vampires lurking in the shadows and it's this mysterious thing you see every once in a while through the course of the movie, and we're focused on the victims or the people that are frightened by it. And yeah, so that's what I really like about it too. What's really funny is I actually picked up the Blu-ray fairly recently. And it was funny, as soon as I put it in, I watched it on my PS4. So that's nice. One of my few Blu-ray devices I have at home to watch discs. And it was funny, as soon as the movie started, I expected, like, you know, when you buy a Blu-ray movie now, it might have some trailers, it might open up. But no, this one...
It just went straight into the movie?
It actually went into like a behind-the-scenes thing. It was really neat.
That's amazing.
It's like Antonio Banderas, Anne Rice, and some of the other filmmakers. And it was really interesting because Antonio Banderas basically is saying, like, the story of, you know, in so many words, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something about, like, you know, the story of vampires have been told in many different ways. And this one is very unique because you only see through the eyes of the vampire.
Right.
And you're exclusively basically seeing the story only through the eyes of the vampire and what they're experiencing. So it, like, going back to what you said, like, you do have this connection to the characters, these vampires. So that's what I thought was really unique about it too. I really like that. And everyone seemed to be on board with it too, recognize it. And it
still stands. Some people, I heard some, I don't know if I heard it correctly. Maybe I just wanted to hear it. One of my buddies was like, you know, some people consider this to be the best vampire movie that exists, just simply because of its storytelling, because it stepped outside of tradition in the way it told stories, and nobody could tell the story the same way afterward.
Right, that's true.
Because we go back to seeing it through the victim's eyes, the human's eyes, or whatever, you know. And then if they try to do it this way, it's campy, weird, and terrible, like Twilight.
Exactly, the cheesy. Oh my gosh, Twilight.
Yeah, we're not even going to go there. That's like an abomination. Like, you just strick it off.
I completely agree, and I have seen at least one of those movies too. But I'll leave it at that. So
I feel for you.
Yeah, but solid vampire movie. I love how it just. I think the pacing is perfect too. Like when I was watching it, I'm also. The acting, I think, is really the highlight of this, especially Tom Cruise.
I'm so glad that you're going to bring him up as Lestat, because, so I read the book. Did you read? You didn't read the book?
No, so you've read the books,
I've read the books. I've read the series of books. So I've read The Vampire Lestat, Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned, and I think The Vampire Armand was where I left off.
Is that the Vampire Chronicles?
Yeah.
Was that okay?
Yeah. And they're so freaking good. Vampire Armand kind of falls off and gets a little too... like word salady. It just starts to go on and with prose, and it's just kind of falls away from what the other books really did. But so I read Vampire Lestat, Interview with the Vampire, and when this movie was being cast, Anne Rice heard that Tom Cruise was going to be Lestat, and she like lost her shit. She just like, fuck no, who is this guy? You're gonna bring in like some Hollywood like A-list guy that's like hot right now, for what? So that people will buy tickets, and like that's gonna totally drive down the whole quality of the movie and the storytelling. But what ended up happening was like, you could not put a better person as Lestat. He was through and through that character. I mean, even from the standpoint of reading the book, his fiery passion, his forceful personality, his power, his drive, just his overall intensity, like that is Lestat. Like just down to the core in the books, Tom Cruise is Lestat, and I don't think you'll ever find another Lestat. You would have to really reinvent that wheel. Right. Like, you know, the Joker character for like the Batman
Yeah,
series,
yeah.
it would just have to be a complete reinvention because you're not going to be able to do Lestat like Tom Cruise
Wow.
did.
So yeah, coming from someone who's read the books, that's I think that's especially valid in the point that
And
did
yes,
a great job. Yeah.
because afterwards, after Anne Rice saw his performance, she was like, okay, never mind, ignore what I said.
Right. If I remember reading correctly too, I did a little bit of research on like just the overall behind the scenes stuff, and I guess she wrote a letter of apology to Tom Cruise.
Oh, did
too. Like,
she?
yeah, like sorry, because I guess it was pretty public that she was upset, right? Like about him being
Yeah.
cast. So, but yeah, totally. Like, I don't know. Like when I feel like people tell me, "Oh, Tom Cruise, he's just a basic actor." I'm like, I don't know. You got to look at his catalog.
Who
like,
says that?
I mean, I've had some arguments with friends who like his movies. And, I mean, they like his movies, but they don't consider him a good actor. I'm like,
That's
come on,
so
you got to
awful.
watch this movie if you haven't seen it. Like, that's what I
It's like,
recommend.
yeah, we could do a whole segment on just talking about Tom Cruise movies because, like, I get it because at this time he only did like his recent one was like Top Gun. He was
Yeah.
coming out of that and he did Cocktails. Like his choices,
Yeah, it's like
were like to pay the bills, but
Right.
he hit some roles that were
yeah,
like a real stretch and like proof of his like acting capability.
Mm-hmm.
And like I agree with you. Anybody who says that, watch this
yeah,
film
totally. Yeah.
and watch his range.
Yeah.
And the same could be said for Brad Pitt. I mean, Brad Pitt's been able to do a lot more films that have a wider range of character development and emotion and just overall just like strength. But in this film, like he nailed tragedy
yeah,
like 100%.
totally. And
Pain and suffering and tragedy.
all the emotion was there in the performance. Like,
Yeah, and he was purely Louis too. Like even in the books, I think he portrayed Louis better than Louis in the books.
wow.
Just to the level, the depth of quiet suffering and guilt. And another thing too. So about casting, he was not the first choice for that role.
Yeah, well, okay, so real quick, I've noticed, I don't know if this is a 90s movies thing, but like I looked at the list of all the considerations of actors and actresses they wanted in this movie. I'm like,
Really?
the list goes on and on. Yeah. I think
Before
even,
they got to Brad Pitt?
Believe it or not, I think it's Cher was even considered to
Cher,
be
huh?
like the female version of Lestat or something like that. Like they were considering doing that for the movie because they felt like the audiences would be more receptive to a male-female sort of
Dynamic. Oh yeah, we got to hit
yeah.
that.
So
Yeah,
so
later,
that's-
but-
we'll hit that later. But still, like I don't know, is that something that's just common in Hollywood? Like people have all these actors in mind, and then they're like, no, we're gonna just take this person in. Because I felt like the list was Natalie Portman was supposed to be. I guess she auditioned for Claudia too and stuff like that. So I'm
Oh.
like, what? There was so many people involved in this process, or thought of at least in
What's
auditioned.
funny is I think as for acting chops, I think Natalie Portman definitely would have been able to nail it. However, Kirsten Dunst has this look of, I don't know what it
She had
is.
the
Like
look.
as a
Yeah,
kid,
yeah.
she had that look like she might just rip your face off.
Yeah, she did. You're right. Yeah,
and
there was
that's
that.
what Claudia was in, as a character.
Yeah.
But the first choice for Louis was Johnny Depp.
Oh wow! See, that's crazy too.
Yeah, and I
can
get it
imagine that.
because he fits, Johnny Depp in the 90s fits the book's description of Louis physically.
Right.
And he just has that brooding look, that permanent brooding look. But at that age, did he have the chops to reach that emotional depth that Brad Pitt did? I mean, the scene when he loses his family, he loses his daughter, and he just rips through that theater in the
Yeah.
catacombs,
Yeah.
and the pure rage and pain and anguish that he portrays just through the eyes.
Yeah. And I think that was particular scene is when Antonio Banderas, I forget the character's name, but he goes up to him and he says something along the lines of "not now," because he knows he wants to seek revenge on all those vampires that put him in that pit,
Yeah.
and you just see the fury in his eyes. I mean, the contacts probably help a little
they
bit.
added a little bit more,
But even then, like you can see in his face and his acting, it's like, oh my gosh, he's going to do something. You almost actually want him to as the audience. You're like, I hope he wreaks havoc on these.
and
vampires who wronged
because
him.
of the time that we're recording this, like that's the anguish that he feels and his level of rage for revenge and to seek justice. you know, that's what I wanted out of like Game of Thrones, the finale.
Yes,
you know,
yes,
I just
exactly.
wanted that development where I feel the need that this is the only way this is gonna go down,
Right.
because it has to, and I wanted to be there with that character. But I digress.
Yes,
That's like
I
a
totally
whole
know what you're
other
talking about, though.
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, his portrayal of just pure anguish was, I thought, hands down, just like phenomenal. Like I felt it sitting at home, even as a kid, and then
Yeah.
when I watch it as an adult, it's like tenfold.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Because you understand a little bit of that emotion, perhaps, when he goes through like losing someone.
Loss, yeah. And then like, you know, lack of control, or like no going, you know, there's no going back after you step over this line and you don't care.
Right. So an aspect of the characters that I also found very intriguing too was that the dynamic between the two male characters, and they're both vampires, and I just thought that was really interesting in the respect that they wanted to possibly explore the idea of turning Louis into a female character just for the movies, but I don't know. I think that would totally
Louis or Lestat?
I think I forgot which one, but one of them they were thinking about having. Because Cher was in the considered, or at least
I love
thought
Cher,
of.
but I don't know that would have been.
I guess I could kind of
good
see her as a
move.
vampire, but
Sure,
but acting wise for this particular,
I don't know that
story,
that depth was there
Yeah.
to create that harsh dynamic. Because the thing about having them as guys was that they could push each other in a way that if had Cher played the role of Louis, it would have been abusive.
Yeah,
In
Right.
this way, it was because of the time, you know, 94, and because of the general tone, the political tone and social tone, that we could accept the harsh treatment from Lestat of Louis, because they were two men.
oh right,
And it also gave an outlet, I think, to some of, you know, seeing the dynamic between their relationship, to the fact that either A, you know, it leans more LGBTQ, and sort of expresses without explicitly stating
right.
their relationship, as having that sort of dynamic, because they're two dads with a daughter,
Yeah,
essentially.
right. I was going to say that the family.
So there's kind of a queer aspect to it. And, you know, Anne Rice's books are very leaning on the very edge of homoerotic.
right.
But there is this deep intimacy that exists between the male characters, because Armand wants Louis to be his companion. And
Right.
when you watch the film, and I felt it even as a kid, that it was more than just, hey, be my BFF.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I've always kind of felt that with the characters too. When I was younger as
There
well.
was this very like almost sexual romantic tension between the characters, that I thought was really brave to do
Yeah.
in a mainstream film like, you know, Interview with the Vampires, that came out in 1994 as a you know, an A-list type film.
Right.
You know,
It's unfortunate because I feel like that could have been the turning point for films in that era, and other filmmakers should have followed that, you know, that idea of it's you know, let's put more stories out there like this, you know.
yeah, because it did really well, and people
Yeah,
responded to
it
it well. I
responded
don't
to it
think
well.
there was a lot of backlash
No.
about the closeness of two
Right.
male characters like that.
like movies like The Birdcage too around that time.
Yeah, it came out around the same
yeah,
time.
so it's, you know, I feel like they, you know, filmmakers. I don't know. I wish there was
they-
that was the turning point for more movies to come out that
And then,
explored characters that were
What
gay.
was it? Keanu Reeves did. I don't know when it came out. I feel like maybe it was a little ways before.
Oh,
it
with
was My Private Idaho.
Is that with River Phoenix?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly.
and
There's
they did that.
all those movies were coming out.
And then we had Fried Green Tomatoes,
Fried Green Tomatoes, right?
right, which was in the 90s, mid 90s.
And then the movies like I think Philadelphia too, right, with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, I feel like the 90s were
Pretty progressive.
pretty progressive, right?
Yeah.
Where did that happen? What happened?
Yeah,
Why-
I
it's
know,
like it
right?
all
They were
fell off and,
brave. They took more
Yeah.
risk, stepped out a little bit. And now in this era, we have reboots, and we have sequels, and we have, you know, comic books
yeah.
being turned into films because they're already popular.
They're already-
so we don't
something
have the
exists.
same risk-taking, adventurous spirit of film
in a way that's not so, with good storytelling too, not just for the sake of making a story that has two characters that are that are in love with each other, whether.
But it's taking the power of an intense relationship and just not focusing on gender.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
One thing I think I was really kind of surprised by this movie too. I thought it was the whole tone of it, from what I remember when I was a kid watching scenes, was like very scary. There's certain scenes that are very somber. I totally missed it though until I saw it this time around. There's like a dark humor aspect to it in some scenes too. Like when Claudia's mom is in the chair there when Louis finds her, and then Lestat comes in and he's like dances with the body and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Very subtle little like things that are like really dark, but are meant. I guess he finds humor in it. But
yeah, what's funny is like we hate Lestat if you've never read the books. And this is like your first exposure to the Chronicles. Lestat got that way because his own story is equally tragic. And it was just something that, like, in the books, he turns into a vampire against his will, and then his maker leaves him. So, like, his maker turns him into a vampire and then kills himself.
Oh, I don't think they touched on that in the movie, right?
No, they don't talk about any of that. So it was this really great way to like expose Lestat for who he is at that moment as you know him. And he's just so closed off that he's not going to talk about his past. But his past, I mean, he's like that for a reason. He didn't start like that. So he lost his maker. He had to find his own way and discover what it meant to be a vampire, how to be a vampire, and what that meant for his soul and like his friendships and like companionship and the fact that he was never going to die. And then, in the book, and it's, spoiler, I'm going to give it away. If you're going to read the books, you probably shouldn't watch this. But in the books, his mom gets sick and she's about to die. And of everyone in his family, she was the closest person to him. So he chooses to turn her.
Oh, wow.
And then they like go on this like adventure together, learning how to be vampires and like go on these killing sprees and like learning. Yeah. And basically his mom turned out to be more vampire than Lestat. And she dived into the world like more deeper than he did and absorbed her independence and eventually got to a point where she was like, yeah, we've been like traveling companions for a while, but I need to like change things up. So I'm going to go find a new companion. Okay, bye.
That's crazy.
And so like his whole life has been revolved. I mean, he spent so much time with her. He lost his maker. He has to figure it out on his own. He turns his mother. They spend all this time together where he feels like he's going to have somebody till the end of time, a companion, someone who understands him, and she ditches him. And then he also goes through certain amounts of death and loss and stuff. So by the time he gets to Louis, he's completely jaded. Yeah,
I would say you're just cynical at that point, like with anything. It's just like, I've seen so much loss, so much tragedy. Like, how do you have any more emotion anymore?
Yeah, and so when he looks at Louis suffering, he's like,
oh, give me a break, right?
Yeah, please. You know what this is? Yeah.
And actually, it's interesting because I feel like the character of Louis, throughout most of his time that we see him, at least in the movie, he's always had that moral aspect to him. Like, he doesn't like killing, he doesn't like having to kill people. I don't think he ever got around to, like, at least it didn't show in the movie that he fully is like, oh, whatever, I'm just going to have to, feed on some human and not care about it. Like, I feel like he still had that component about his character. That's what I really thought was interesting, because most vampires, at least how they portray them, are like, oh, they don't care if they just
they're just hungry.
Yeah, they're just hungry. And a human is not even, that's like that one scene you mentioned earlier, before we recorded. It was the scene with the two prostitutes, right?
Yes.
And that one, that's an intense scene.
It's really intense, and it's been burned into my memory forever. Because not only are you dealing with Louis' struggle, right? He's like essentially starving himself because he can't reconcile his need as a vampire and his humanity. And we're having this huge like philosophical argument, and Lestat is like losing his mind because he knows that if Louis doesn't feed, he's going to start to wither away. And he Lestat at this point just wants a companion.
Right.
He wants somebody to just share the world with. And here he is, and he can't get this guy on the same page with him. And then in the background is the woman who is bleeding to death.
Yeah.
And she realizes she's going to die. And she is begging for her life.
Yeah.
And she's like set dressing to them.
Yeah.
I mean, she is like a prop or something. for Lestat to throw at Louis, and Louis is seeing her as like this personification of his guilt and his inner struggle. And this is all playing out in one scene.
Yeah. And someone's screaming about their lives in the background. Like,
and it's like it's just,
and then just it's really
heartbreaking.
It is
to
heartbreaking.
watch.
Yeah. Because there's so many intense emotions happening at once. Like they're arguing, she's crying in the background, and putting her in the coffin for a brief moment. Like, oh my gosh, how terrifying!
And that's actually one of my favorite scenes for its intensity, because every time I watch it, I'm always sitting in my living room.
Yeah, right. Just like
kind of like that, but I can't not watch it happen.
Right.
Because there's so many like layers of storytelling that's happening between all of the characters, and just the general tone of the film and the way it's being all brought together is just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And you don't see that. I feel like you don't see that in too many movies of this caliber, or even vampire movies, where someone gets bit and they're like bleeding out and dying, and you see that process of either them perhaps becoming a vampire or just, pleading for their life. I feel like most vampire movies you see, it's like, oh, someone gets bitten, boom, they're a vampire. Or so like but this moment you're seeing like, oh my gosh, this person's dying as they're arguing. And that makes it for especially emotional.
I like that there's this like ritual of like you become a vampire not because you were bit like some kind of virus, but it's something that has to, like, a vampire has to has to essentially replace your blood with their blood,
right, to
change you over. And then it's a painful process.
It's part of the slogan, right? Was it "Drink from me and you'll live forever"?
Yeah,
that they have to give the blood to you to be the vampire. It's not like, oh, you're bit.
Ta-da, welcome to immortality, And Louis, the second he changes and he gets enough, he's like crawling on the floor, he's like curling up in so much pain, he's feeling himself die.
Yeah. It's like the pain of death, but then you come out of it, I guess.
You come out of it. And then there's like, so there's one thing in the film that I never understood. Even to this day, I don't really understand what's happening. Mm-hmm. And it's when Louis first wakes up as a vampire and he's looking at the world with new eyes, and the statue he was previously looking at suddenly opens its eyes and looks back at him.
I didn't understand that either. Well, I will say, and I'll get back on track with it, but I really liked the effects, even the non-practical effects. I thought that was pretty good, like especially the subtleties of the teeth growing and stuff. I was like, whoa, that's really good for 94 like graphics.
Out of every vampire movie, their teeth are my favorite like layout.
Yeah, almost it looks like they're at part of their teeth.
It's just part of their natural teeth. They don't like shoot out like True Blood always kind of got me as kind of cheesy with the two and they clicked out, it was like really weird. And like every other film always puts the teeth like really close to the front, and like as human beings, we have our own carnivorous teeth, right? And so as vampires, you get like, and it's not just one set, you get two sets.
Right.
It's like a sections of your teeth have become really sharp, so that and they never go away. They never fully go away, so that when you see them in public, they look normal. And I love that about like the makeup.
Makeup was great.
Yes. Yeah. Because when you look at them at first glance, they're beautiful, right? And you're so drawn to them visually, like they're just so compelling. Like you want to get close to them, but when you get closer, it's just something's just not right. Like it's unnatural. Their skin tone's unnatural. The way their veins sit on their skin is really unnatural, which I loved in the makeup.
They did a really good job. And from what I understand too, is that the way they accomplished that is they had the actors upside down for a period of time, so the blood rushed to their head.
So they could naturally
see. They naturally draw out the veins that come out.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so
that's so brilliant.
brilliant. I know, who thinks of that, right? Did they win any awards for the costuming and makeup? Because
yeah,
I mean,
they were just so on point with the way that they created this attractive yet unsettling being. Like, what is a vampire? You know, and then when you tell a story like this, you know, when you're telling it through the perspective of your characters and you want to connect with them, like their humanity on the surface remains, right?
Right.
But like they are dead and they do feed on people. So how do we create this like predatory look?
Right.
Their teeth were perfect. And because also too, when you get too close to them and they smile, you just, in that moment, it's like if I were in front of them and they smiled at me because I paid them a compliment, that's what would happen. Oh, fuck, this was not a good move.
Too close now. This is really, like you mentioned earlier, top 5 vampire movie. This is definitely in my top 5 too, vampire films. I don't know where it ranks, but it's pretty high up there. Maybe 3 or 2. Dracula being my first as well. So even some of the older ones like Bela Lugosi, you know, those classic
Nosferatu is like a top
those are in there
sure.
too somewhere. I really haven't decided what the exact ranking is, but they're all in that collective top 5.
Definitely.
So it's in there.
And this film separates itself because of its character development, the intimacy between audience and all of the characters, and getting in touch with who they are, the why, their struggles, and what they have to put up with, because even towards the end, you know, Louis wants to share his story so that vampires don't continue. Right. So it's not something to fall in love with. It's something to be afraid of. And that's what, and then it backfires because the reporter is so enthralled with this story and looking at Louis that he wants to be undead. And Louis is just like, what the fuck?
It's like, I clearly
failed.
I failed, like trying to tell you it's not a good thing. The reporter only cares about, you know, the being that eternal life aspect. But I love the ending, and I guess, I mean, we could talk about it real quick, but I just love how it comes around.
Because Lestat shows up and he's like, I'm going to give you the choice that I never had or whatever.
And I there's something about that, hearing that version of Sympathy for the Devil by Guns N' Roses, which isn't my favorite version of that song. Obviously, it's not the original, but there's something about the music playing out and getting that wide shot of the bridge. The Golden Gate, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Which, I think it was maybe the first or second movie ever that was able to shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for a movie. So that was really cool to see that. And I just recommend anyone to watch this movie having it.
You
brilliant
need
performances.
to.
Even if you don't like the whole, vampire thing, you can really appreciate the filmmaking and the acting, at least. I mean, it's really good.
They really gave themselves to these characters. And some... I read some interview afterwards that, Brad Pitt probably was really miserable. So all of those feelings and portrayals of just anguish was 100% because they had to film all in the evening.
I'm sure he saw what the price tag was on the movie and was like, oh, maybe I should.
Well, he tried to opt out. He tried to buy out of his contract.
Wow.
Because he was so miserable filming only at night. So they were doing their 12-hour shifts at night. All the shoots were at night. And it went on for weeks. And so it was weeks he wasn't able to see the sun, and he was just so depressed that he got to a point where he wanted to opt out of his contract or buy himself out of the contract, and it turned out that it was going to be too expensive to do it, so he just suffered through the rest of it. So his suffering is real.
It's real, so it reflects out into his performance.
Well, method acting, it worked. True. It happened. So
I mean, I could go on and on about this movie, but I guess I'd highly recommend this to anyone who hasn't seen it, and might even delve into the books myself. I know there's some movies that have come out after this.
Don't watch them.
The Queen of the Damned.
Don't watch them.
I did see, unfortunately.
Oh my God.
But it's crazy. I didn't realize until after we had talked about this that it was a part of that Vampire Chronicle thing.
Yeah. Do you see now why it sucks so bad?
Yeah.
They're supposed to be connected.
Okay.
So don't watch the rest of the movies, but read the books, because Queen of the Damned is fucking insane. It's so good.
Yeah, the book.
The Vampire Lestat is good. A little slow to start, but good overall. And then Tale of the Body Thief is a really fun read too. Okay, and that's on Lestat.
So they're all connected too.
And they're all connected.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Well, I'm going to check that out. I like to check out books, whether it's before or after I see a movie, just to get a different feel for it and different appreciation. So
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess this wraps up our first-ish episode in this format. We do have an email if you guys are ever interested in seeing us review or talk about a specific movie that we haven't done yet. You can send it to us at guttedreviews@gmail.com, and then we'll put it on the list to do for the next episode, or at least a future episode. Other than that, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time.